West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
As members of the Republican Party still flock to the former president's side to win his approval, perhaps most interesting of all right now is the one bold-faced name from his inner circle who appears MIA, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law. Once a fixture in the White House and on the campaign trail, sources are now telling CNN about a possible change in the relationship between the two men. We're joined by CNN's chief political correspondent and anchor of State of the Union, Dana Bash. So what have you learned, Dana?
I did this story with our colleague Kate Bennett, and what we are told is that, according to one source I talked to, is that Jared Kushner is checked out of politics right now, certainly checked out of the Trump political world, which is, as you noted, really stunning, given the fact that he was such a presence and a player, wanted to be a player in virtually every facet of the Trump administration, before that in the Trump campaign, and definitely in the Trump campaign in 2016, and definitely in 2020 as well. Now, we are hearing from some who are noting with a very heavy drip of sarcasm and irony that this is classic Jared Kushner, that this is the reputation that he built. When things were really good, he would run to the cameras and talk about winning, although I shouldn't actually overstate the run to the cameras. He wasn't on camera that much, but he wanted to take credit for it. And when things got bad, he would retreat and say, my hands are off. But, you know, it is noteworthy that the former president has had a lot of discussions recently with his new political team, and Kushner is not one of them.
And why might that be?
Well, several reasons, and I'm sure this isn't going to shock you, Anderson. It depends who you talk to in Trump world to get a specific answer. So some people we talk to say that it is his father-in-law, the former president, who casts some blame about his loss on his son-in-law, on Jared Kushner, because he was very involved in the campaign. And others say that it is very much Kushner. In fact, one source told me that he has just kind of had it, that even for somebody who is related by marriage, Trump wears on you, and he just needs a break. He wants to focus on other things. He wouldn't mind focusing on some of the issues that he very much liked when he was in the administration. But the answer is we don't really know the real story, but what we do know is that he's definitely not involved. He might be, we're told, if the former president does actually run again in 2024, but not in the near future. That's not the plan anyway.
I mean, it always raises questions about whether he has interest in politics moving forward, or other members of the Trump family, his Ivanka Trump in particular.
Yeah, and she said, I guess pretty publicly at this point, that she's not going to challenge the senator from Florida, Marco Rubio. There was a lot of speculation that she would do that once they moved to Florida after they left really, really quickly in and around the inauguration of President Biden. The person who is very much involved and in the loop within the Trump family still is Don Jr. I mean, he's there all the time. He's very much focused, along with the former president's two former campaign managers, Brad Parscale and Bill Stepien, Jason Miller, and others. But when it comes to the family, we're told that Don Jr. is really the person who is the most involved, very, very involved in the decisions that the former president makes, including continuing to put out statements that perpetuate the big lie, even as recently as today, Anderson.
Well, it's fascinating. Brad Parscale is back in the circle of love, given what occurred there. The distance between Kushner and the former president, what's interesting is, I mean, it comes as Alan Weisselberg, who's a longtime CFO of the Trump organization, is reportedly under scrutiny by New York investigators interested in knowing what he may know. And the idea being that if there was something untoward, he would know about it, and would he then, if there was pressure on him, would he flip? I mean, is there any sense who the former president is leaning on? If Jared Kushner is, I mean, he's not obviously, I guess, in contact with Weisselberg.
Right. I mean, and that the Weisselberg story, the Washington Post was reporting on it. This is one of the most fascinating developments in all of the questions of whether or not the former president is really going to be in hot water legally for anything that happened, particularly with regard to his finances at the Trump organization, because as we know, the Supreme Court allowed the New York Attorney General to get New York City, I should say, to get the former president's tax returns. And now the gentleman you just talked about, Alan Weisselberg, he is somebody who is the person who knows most about Trump finances. He's been working with the organization since like 1980, worked for Fred Trump, his father, and then him. And so the fact that it seems as though prosecutors and investigators are putting pressure on him vis-a-vis his children.
It is Friday, the 5th of March of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, indeed. Well, let's hoist a very tasty cocktail to Tim Lang, Meteor Blades, on his announced retirement. Well, you know, some people might have said that he retired about 20 years ago when he first started writing and sharing on Daily Kos, because he had put in a whole career at the LA Times. Well, in print journalism, shall we say. So, but he's really retiring now because he's been a hard worker, in spite of his, like, retiring from print media back in the day. Congratulations, Tim, and I hope your retirement is all that you've been expecting it to be, indeed. I remember Tim. We used to talk about him in our family. My dad liked reading his work and would look for his byline. And when I found out that Meteor Blades was Tim Lang, oh my God, talk about, well, I was starry-eyed. And when I met Tim the first time at Daily Kos headquarters, when it was still in Berkeley, that's how long ago that was, it was great. And Tim is a very friendly and embracing person. At least I thought so. And I always felt fortunate in being able to engage. And whenever I see that he's RT'd something of mine or wrecked it on Daily Kos, made a comment, shared, it really, I have to say, it means a lot. It's like, wow, Meteor Blades. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. So hopefully when this pandemic lessens somewhat so that we can travel about I hope that we can get together either down in his area or up here in Oregon. And there's a few other from the Daily Kos family and the Bay Area generally that I'd like to visit with. And I can't wait, but I will, because we're still in a pandemic. Now is not the time to, go back to our old ways. Just because we have the vaccines, it's not enough. We got to continue. In fact, I would suspect that mask wearing might be something that we might want to do for a while. Have you noticed the precipitous decline in even the common cold, let alone the flu? And why is that? Because people are washing their hands, they're wearing a mask, and they're socially distancing. What a byproduct that behavior is. And Texas and Mississippi and a few others say, we can't have our constituents alive. You know how much that costs us? We need them dead. That's the only thing that I can consider would be their reasoning in, lifting mask mandates, social distancing protocols. Next thing you know, we're going to hear they don't want to wear a seatbelt when they haven't washed their hands. All right, that's freedom, I guess. Except for one thing. We still have to pay for your freedom. All right? That's why our insurance rates go up, because of people like that. Okay, we do have laws, to, encourage people to do the right thing. Because if they won't do the right thing on their own, guess what? That's what laws are for. I know they hate laws. I know they hate government. And they've worked for decades to make sure government doesn't work. Every time they get into power, they dismantle something, they break it, and then they obstruct when we are in the midst of trying to fix what they have broken, just like today. Yep, after 10 hours plus of reading the bill, every amendment in the bill, they are now back to obstructing on the debate, the actual debate, because that's all they have. And I know they don't like being called Neanderthals, because it may be that Neanderthals have gotten short shrift in history. Maybe. But you know what? They're Nazis. You don't like being called Neanderthals? Well, you're a Nazi. And the reason they're Nazis is because, look at Gosar, for instance. Spoke at a white supremacist, anti-Semite confab. Not one Republican will rebuke him. Why? Because Nazis do not rebuke other Nazis. Josh Hawley wants to know, what kind of evidence do you have on that cell phone data? Because they've arrested a White House aide with a top security clearance in the Capitol riot itself. Took a police shield and started bashing cops with it. We're getting reports that Trump actually ordered, and, when we say ordered, let's just put it this way. Capitol Police emailed in real time that Trump was sending his mob to the Capitol to take it over. When Trump said, go to the Capitol, I'm right with you. We'll walk up this boulevard. I love it. I'll be right with you. You go ahead. I'll be right behind you. And then he went back to his, command tent and watched the insurrection as it happened on TV. And for over 3 hours, no help was given. And now Representative Swalwell, thank you, has sued him and others, including Mo Brooks. I like that. And for what? Well, for planning and carrying out the insurrection on January 6th. Did they really think they were going to get away with it? Yeah, they really did. And they still think they're getting away with it. Because what is happening right now with the COVID relief bill is part of the insurgency. When an elected becomes part of an insurrection, that insurrection then becomes an insurgency. Because electeds are involved and they're using the power and rules of government to advance their insurgency. Just like in every banana republic in Latin America, just like in every, warlord takeover of any pseudo-democracy even anywhere in the world. It's the same playbook. It's just that we kept telling ourselves it can't happen here. Well, you know what? It is happening here right now. Nullifying an election? Yeah, they've got quite a bit of experience in that. Taking over a capital, taking over the capital, they have experience in that too because they practice on state capitals to the point of actually having concrete plans to kidnap Governor Whitmer, put her on a show trial, and then decapitate her on film like ISIS. Don't call them ISIS, okay? They're Nazis. And I should remind folks, the Nazis used decapitation as part of their strategy to, well, win the hearts and minds of the local populace. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? It's the end of the week. And even though the weekends are a lot nicer now, it's still we're still in a bit of resistance, aren't we? And we need to fight the Nazis, and they need to be punched, and we need to not feel bad about it. We have work to do. At the top, where in the world is Jared Kushner? He's disappeared. I don't blame him. Yeah, I think he's turned into Fredo now. I think he has. On the rest of the menu, Georgia Republicans want to make it a crime to supply food and water to voters waiting in line all day to vote. They've taken away voting places. You can't drop off your vote in a ballot box. You can't vote early. You have to stand in line, and now they're going to make it a crime for someone to bring you bread and water. For the first time in state history, the North Dakota House expelled a lawmaker for severe misconduct. And it happened to be a repug, too. Repugs controlled North Dakota, and repugs kicked out another repug. It was so severe. And the Louisiana Attorney General lost a lawsuit he filed against a reporter who requested public records on his top aide. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where OPEC and Russia set oil prices up with a deal to contain output over pandemic fears. I think they know something. And the U.S. blocked the Myanmar junta's attempt to empty $1 billion from its New York Fed account. All that and more. On West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for all that you do. If you would then take a look across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, there is our Patreon link. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us the equivalent of what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, if you could send those funds to us once a month, we are able to then stretch those dollars. We then pay our bills, which allows us to fly under the radar. Literally, we fly under the radar, and we continue resisting this terrible Nazi scourge trying to take over our body politic. We cannot let it happen. And your generosity is allowing us to fulfill our civic duty and the work that needs to be done to save the world. And we would not be able to do it without your help. And thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom, for everything that you do. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that posted up on Twitter and other social media platforms like that Facebook thing. And because that's what we do, about 10 minutes before showtime. And then do please check out the show notes and links. That is really where the reportage is. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube, etc., wherever. They're everywhere. My snoozing sous chef is working really hard again. It's the end of the week. And usually on the weekends, that's when he works the hardest. Though with the sun being out this last week, and we'll get into the weather because we're having somewhat of a change, but he is loving the sun. And unfortunately, we won't have as much sun and outside activities because, well, we do have some weather coming our way. But he has been loving it. And when he goes back to work snoozing, it's because he's been putting in the hours while playing, because that's what English bulldogs do. Okay, we'll let him continue working. I hope you don't mind. I love him. I'm not kicking him out. I won't. Let's tuck in to this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, I should mention once again, for those of you who may be new to the show, Friday is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and the cocktail for all time, du jour, but, d'année, is the French 77, and it is the most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktails. Please do take care. It is a very potent spirit. And, yeah, it'll send you. So drink with a friend. Don't drink too much. Sip. This first offering is out of the American Independent by Emily Singer. Republicans in the Georgia House of Representatives on Monday passed an elections bill that would require ID to vote by mail and cut back on early voting on Sundays. The latter, a provision voting rights advocates say is directly aimed at suppressing the vote of black Georgians who often organize caravans to vote after church services. Now they want a separation of church and state. How coincidental is that? Well, hidden in that 66-page bill is another provision that would make it a crime to give out food and drinks to voters waiting in line to cast their ballots. According to the text of the bill, no person is allowed to, quote, give, offer to give, or participate in the giving of any money or gifts, including but not limited to food and drink to an elector within 25 feet of any voter standing in line to vote at any polling place. You have to stand out here for 16 hours. You don't get to eat. You don't get to drink. You want to go to the bathroom, you lose your place in line. This is America. We don't want people voting here. Well, the GOP move to make it a crime to give out refreshments to voters in line to vote comes after Georgia voters had to wait as long as 10 hours to cast ballots in the first days of early voting in the 2020 general election. Groups like Pizza to the Polls, a nonpartisan nonprofit launched in 2016 to help people waiting in lines to vote, sent hundreds of pizzas to voters waiting to cast ballots in Georgia's January 5th Senate runoff elections. John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock won those elections, putting Democrats in both of Georgia's U.S. Senate seats for the first time since 2003. And that really pissed off the Repugs because they thought they had their cheating down pat. Celebrities had publicized Pizza to the Polls efforts during the runoff elections, hoping to encourage those waiting in long lines at polling sites to stay until they cast their ballots. But if the bill becomes law, it could stop groups like Pizza to the Polls from helping feed people who are forced to wait in long lines to cast a ballot that result from the state's restrictive voting laws. Pizza to the Polls did not immediately respond to a request for comment about whether it believes it could still operate in Georgia if the bill becomes law. However, Clarissa Byrne-Hessek, a professor of criminal law at the University of North Carolina, said it could be a crime for someone to order snacks and then hand them out to fellow voters at polling places. The Georgia House just passed legislation that would not only make it more difficult to vote, but also make it a crime to give food or water to anyone standing in line to vote. The idea that this should be a crime is completely outrageous, she tweeted. The Georgia bill is one of hundreds of voter suppression bills Republicans have introduced since Trump's 2020 loss that would make it harder to vote, including by cutting back absentee voting and reducing the amount of time voters have to cast a ballot. And I would also add the getting rid of voter drop boxes, and they are eliminating the actual places to vote. In some cases, people have to drive 10 or 20 miles to a polling place. But the Georgia bill goes further, rolling back the number of early voting days, which could result in longer lines on Election Day, and then seeking to make it a crime for people to help make things easier for those forced to wait in those long lines. Yeah, they don't want to make it easier to vote, because the one thing that repugs hate more than America, they hate Americans voting. James McPherson at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The North Dakota House, yesterday Thursday, voted to expel a lawmaker accused of threatening and sexually harassing women at the Capitol. The first time in state history a lawmaker has been expelled. Members voted 69-25 to expel Representative Luke Simmons, a Republican from Dickinson, for a pattern of behavior they said stretched back to soon after he took office in 2017. The expulsion came with strong support from Simmons' own party, which holds a supermajority in the chamber. Majority Leader Chet Pollard, who co-sponsored the resolution to expel, said Simmons had been given multiple chances to avoid being in this situation. There is only one way to make this behavior stop, and that is to expel Representative Simmons from this House, Pollard said. Simmons, who denied wrongdoing, was defiant before the vote. He blamed accusers for twisting my words, said any other lawmaker could be in his position, and complained that he wasn't being afforded due process. Oh, how many times have we heard that before? I could make any accusation against any of you, Simmons said ahead of the vote. Under this circumstance, we are under "you're guilty." Surrounded by his family and friends following the vote, Simmons said he believed he would have had a lot of support from his fellow lawmakers. Lynn Bowie, his attorney, said he may argue the case in court, but would leave that up to Simmons after he talks with his family. Simmons is accused of a pattern of sexually aggressive, lewd, and threatening behavior. Representative Emily O'Brien, a Republican, said his harassment was so pervasive that she switched desks to be away from him. Prior to coming forward, I struggled with whether this was something I wanted to relive, she told fellow House members. It's hard to rehash the unwarranted, disturbing, and uncomfortable experiences. I think shame on you, Emily O'Brien, for not coming forward and being a voice for others. A 14-page document compiled by the Nonpartisan Legislative Council includes allegations that Simmons made advances toward female staffers and interns, commented on their appearances, and tried to give one staffer an unsolicited shoulder massage. One staffer described his behavior as really creepy. Well, you know, it starts with a shoulder rub, and the next thing you know, you don't want to be near a broom closet. Really. Well, the council this week released 2 additional documents alleging inappropriate and bizarre behavior by Simmons, a 43-year-old rancher and barber who is married and has 5 children. One woman said Simmons referred to her as that pretty one and insulted her husband, saying that usually women who are classy dressers like myself are married to schmucks like my husband. The woman, whose name was redacted in documents, also alleged that Simmons once placed his lunchbox in her office before leaving to use the restroom and said, "Bet you hope there's not a bomb in there, huh?" Republican Representative Shannon Roars-Jones, an attorney, said on the floor yesterday, that the move to remove Simmons is about inappropriate behavior, not about targeting a political ideology, as Simmons has alleged. Simmons is a member of the loosely organized Bistro Caucus, a far-right group that supports limited government and gun rights. Much of Simmons' proposed legislation over the years reflected that. In other words, he's too far to the right of the right-wing extremists that already run North Dakota's bicameral legislature. Now, Democratic House Minority Leader Josh Boshi of Fargo, who co-sponsored the resolution, looked at Simmons and said, "You have hurt people. You have hurt the integrity of the Legislative Assembly." The North Dakota Constitution says either chamber can expel a member with 2/3 approval. That meant at least 63 members had to approve the resolution to expel Simmons. Now Republicans hold a 80-14 advantage in the chamber. Opponents of the resolution said the process was flawed and that Simmons was not afforded due process. Pollard said the process to expel Simmons went above and beyond what is legally required. GOP Representative Rick Becker, who holds the Bistro Caucus, argued that Simmons' behavior did not warrant expulsion and sought to amend the resolution to censure him instead. That failed, 62-28. Anonymous staff at the AP bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. A judge yesterday, Thursday, ruled against Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry in a lawsuit he filed against a reporter who requested public records. The Advocate reports that State District Judge Tim Kelly of Baton Rouge ordered the release of records regarding a sexual harassment investigation of one of Landry's top aides and said Landry's office must pay the attorney's fees for Advocate and Times-Picayune reporter Andrea Gallo. Landry's unusual lawsuit against a reporter over public records requests drew national scrutiny and a critical statement from the Reporters Committee for the Freedom of the Press, and several media organizations filed briefs supporting the newspaper. They included the Lens, Gray Media Group, the Louisiana Press Association, and Tulane Law School's First Amendment Clinic. The subject of the records is Pat McGee, head of Landry's criminal division, who was disciplined in January after complaints were investigated by an outside law firm, Taylor Porter. Kelly said he would release the relevant records after making redactions of portions that might identify witnesses, victims, or bystanders. Sure. He ordered the Attorney General's office to pay reasonable attorney fees of $6,250 to Scott Sternberg, who represented Gallo, according to the Advocate. Private citizens should not fear a lawsuit every time they ask a powerful politician for public records they are entitled to under the Louisiana Constitution, said Peter Kovacs, the newspaper's editor. So we are pleased with Judge Kelly's ruling that the sexual harassment complaint filed against one of Attorney General Jeff Landry's key leaders is indeed a public record, and for the judge's decision to make Mr. Landry's office pay legal fees for the defense of the suit. The losers are the Louisiana taxpayers who will foot the bill for the plaintiff and the defendant in Landry's unnecessary legal assault against Andrea Gallo, he said. Sternberg said he hopes Kelly's ruling will discourage other governmental bodies from filing copycat suits, and a spokesman for Landry told The Advocate that no appeal is planned. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Black produced, Panther approved. I am calling it. We are experiencing an outpouring of black films the likes of which we have not seen before. Screw the slick repackagings of stereotypes pitched to black people and comforting to whites. We're talking about movies starring black people, about black people, made by black people. And all it took was white and black people making a whole hell of a lot of money. What did Ryan Coogler do with his Black Panther money? He formed Proximity Media, his own production company. What did Charles D. King do with the money he made working as a partner for talent agency Jalent WME? He formed Macro, keep an eye on them, his own production company, quote, with a vision of empowering and supporting people of color and diverse storytellers. Because of these producers, director Shaka King was able to make Judas and the Black Messiah, a film about slain Chicago Black Panther leader Fred Hampton, who was surveilled and assassinated by the Chicago PD and the FBI. Not only that, King made the film with Daniel Kaluuya from Black Panther and Get Out, Lakeith Stanfield from Knives Out and Sorry to Bother You, and Dominique Fishback from The Deuce and Project Power. Shaka King started the project 10 years ago, and at first he imagined a sweeping epic covering the whole history of the Black Panthers, but that topic was too much. So King refocused to tell Hampton's story through the eyes of the FBI's infiltrator and informant, Bill O'Neill. This choice means that our lead character and guide through this world is the Judas. And though the movie doesn't demonize O'Neill, it's not like it redeems him. So yes, you get Fred Hampton, but your first and last moments in the film are with his assassins and their lackey. It's an interesting approach, but King's approach works. Judas and the Black Messiah is a tight little story with beautiful visuals and subtly powerful acting. Plus, Hampton's widow and son consulted on it. Yeah, that's what the right black money behind you gets you. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Let's say you have a dog, or maybe you're watching a friend's pup. You have a treat in your hand, so you have the dog's attention. Then you put the treat into a doggy-proof box and let them figure it out. What do you think the dog will do? If you're a dog owner, you probably know. Spike or Spot or Miss Fluffy will probably try in vain for a while. But soon they'll probably turn back to you with those puppy dog eyes, with a look that's both hurt, why would you make it so hard for them after all, and pleading. That, it turns out, is a sophisticated cognitive phenomenon called referential communication. It's an attempt to shift the human's attention towards the problem. And dogs, as it turns out, aren't the only species who can do this. In 2003, a Hungarian biologist named Adam McCloskey tested this ability with an experiment. He gathered a handful of dogs and a group of wolves. Both groups of canines had been hand-raised from birth by people in much the same way. He put a piece of food inside of that doggy-proof box. The wolves kept trying and failing to get the food inside, and we already know what the dogs did. Alan McElligott, an animal cognition researcher at the City University of Hong Kong, wanted to push this test further. He wanted to move beyond dogs versus wolves.
The discussions of those papers and the discussion in the press is all about them being domesticated closely by humans.
He thinks that there's more to the story. What if animals don't need to be domesticated, but instead simply need to be socialized? Maybe it's not that dogs are especially social, but instead that wolves are just especially stubborn.
So we came along in 2016 and did the work on goats and showed that actually it's probably a general domestic animal thing. It's nothing to do with being domesticated as a companion animal.
In a new study, he's gone even further. Enter kangaroos.
And kangaroos generally haven't been used for any of that sort of research. I think most people, when I emailed them and suggested, this problem-solving task with with kangaroos, they thought I was kind of a bit mad or some really eccentric scientist.
McElligott rounded up a group of marsupials from 3 different zoos and sanctuaries. In all, he tested 3 different species: Kangaroo Island kangaroos, eastern gray kangaroos, and red kangaroos. Of 11 animals tested, 10 of them passed, turning their gaze back to McElligott. And of the 10 who turned to look at him, 9 kangaroos actively shifted their gaze between the box and the human. The results were published in December in the journal Biology Letters.
This domestication hypothesis for all these behaviors, we've over-relied on it. And I'm not saying that, kangaroos are just as good as dogs or anything like that. But I'm saying the cognitive capabilities of wild animals that are habituated to humans have probably been underestimated.
McElligott says that it's not enough to study domesticates and their wild counterparts like dogs and wolves. That's why he decided to try kangaroos, which were never domesticated.
You can't deduce the effects of domestication on animal behavior, animal cognition by only studying domesticated animals. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but it's important. So you need to see what the other ones are capable of doing if they're used to being around people.
McElligott says that the pouched marsupials offer up a whole new set of possibilities for understanding the evolution of social cognition. And he's now turned his attention to yet another unexpected species, the Asian water buffalo. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seatbelts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seatbelts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
The prominently displayed banner read, "F*** you, Joe Biden," and below that, "and f*** you for voting for him."
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, and also, mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
2 homeowners in Plymouth, Connecticut hoisted this banner, the words "prominent" in bold white letters on a blue background, which, not surprisingly, caused local residents to complain to the town's police chief, who went to the state's attorney, who told the police chief that the banner was First Amendment protected speech. Resident Michael Stoto, who raised the flag in Connecticut, told the Hartford Courant that he did so because "I hate Biden. I think he's an ignorant fool. It's the best $9 I ever spent on Amazon because it's ticking people off and opening their eyes." These banners are widely available, and so the story has been repeated in towns across the country, which constitutionally actually is the right result. However crass, a property owner's ability to criticize the president is protected by the First Amendment, according to Dan Barrett, legal director of the ACLU of Connecticut. But that's not the end of the story, because those who disagree with the content or disapprove of the words have their First Amendment rights too. To condemn, speak, write, protest, picket, boycott, march, assemble, organize, rally, broadcast, hold forums, post lawn signs, produce shows on local cable access, and of course, hoist their own flags.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
There is a weasel word that politicians use whenever something goes wrong on their watch. Unacceptable. We just heard it slither out of the mouth of Texas Governor Greg Abbott in response to the state's failure to prepare for a killer winter storm. What happened this week to our fellow Texans is unacceptable, he fumed. Well, yes, Gov, but wait, aren't you the guy in charge? Ignoring that little detail, Abbott pointed his outrage at ERCOT, an agency charged with administering electric policy in Texas. But wait again. Those policies are set by the Public Utility Commission, a corporate cozy body that has failed for years to mandate that the state's for-profit utilities weatherize their power generators to prevent freeze-ups. And who appointed the members of that commission? Why, Greg, it was you. In fact, 2 of the 3 members of PUC are former top staffers of the governor. Also, Abbott has been governor for 6 years, and not once has he proposed legislation to require that the corporate owners of electric utilities protect the grid from freezes, as is commonly done in North Dakota and other sub-zero icy places. But, he claims, this year's storm was unprecedented, so it couldn't have been anticipated. Oops, wait again. A notorious rolling grid failure in a 2011 snowstorm left millions of Texans in deadly darkness, a disaster that was also called unacceptable. But then Abbott and other GOP officials did accept it, quietly refusing to require winterization, even as they accepted big campaign donations from those corporate giants that caused the breakdown. Yet, we're now treated to the clownish spectacle of Abbott demanding a legislative investigation and calling for heads to roll. This is Jim Hightower saying, but wait once again, isn't he head number 1?
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day auto workers at GM's Chevy Vega plant in Lordstown, Ohio, walked out on strike. The strike lasted for 18 days. The issues that fueled it were reminiscent of the sit-downs and wildcats that built the UAW in the 30s and 40s. Workers at Lordstown wanted greater control over the production process. The young, integrated workforce of the 1960s social protest era was fed up with long days, forced overtime, increased automation, and dangerous speed up on the assembly line. Long-standing grievances numbered in the thousands, and disciplinary firings were common. Absenteeism was rampant, morale was so low that cars left the assembly line incomplete or vandalized. By the time the strike ended, many felt it was called simply to allow workers to blow off steam. There was no real change in the production process, but jobs eliminated in the 1970 contract were restored, and some 1,400 disciplinary layoffs were dropped. The worker malaise suffered there came to be known as the Lordstown Syndrome. In his book, Staying Alive, the 1970s and the Last Days of the Working Class, Jefferson Cowie notes that the strike compelled the Senate to hold hearings on alienation at work. Its committee produced the report Work in America. This report confirmed many workers at all occupational levels feel locked in. Their mobility blocked, the opportunity to grow lacking in their jobs, challenge missing from their tasks. Cowie concludes that the strike and report initiated the quality of work-life movement that sought to redesign work, introduce automation differently, and invest in human relation strategies, most of which continued to empower management, not workers, albeit with a gentler hand.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit with rain in the vicinity. We are expecting actually, almost 3/4 of an inch of rain today, with rain and snow mixing overnight because we should have some fairly cold temperatures. Cloudy with periods of rain throughout the day. The winds will be at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And a steady rain this evening, tapering to showers and becoming mixed with snow overnight, with lows in the low 30s. Winds will then be light and variable. And then mostly cloudy tomorrow. And winds will be out of the south-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour with a high in the low 50s. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have jumped once again and now stand at 8,525. And deceased now stand at confirmed 116. Pollen is still rated as none here in the Rogue River area proper, the town, and the air quality index for the region is good at 38 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains at 4 in the moderate range. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.99 inches. Visibility currently is at 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 89%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations and a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 43 and mostly cloudy. Paris, or as we like to say, Paris, is 44 and mostly cloudy. Rome, or Roma, is 58 and partly cloudy. Kyiv, we used to call it Kiev, is now 36 and cloudy. Kabul is 53 and fair. Hong Kong is 66 and cloudy. Tokyo is 52 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 67 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 47 degrees and fair. And New York is 28 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. David McHugh of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Caution about the pandemic took the upper hand yesterday, at a meeting of the OPEC oil cartel and allied countries as they left most of their production cuts in place amid worry that coronavirus restrictions could still undermine recovering demand for crude. Many analysts had expected a small production increase as the price of oil has risen 30% since the start of the year. That was only a month or two ago, on hopes that the pandemic will ease, allowing for an economic rebound that should increase energy consumption. Instead, the group of oil producers opted for caution, and their decision in favor of supply restraint quickly sent crude oil prices through the roof. The U.S. contract, which had plunged below zero last year as the pandemic restrictions on businesses devastated demand for energy, jumped about 5% on the day to over $64 a barrel. OPEC countries, led by Saudi Arabia, joined with other countries, including Russia, to reach the deal in an online meeting. Most significantly, Saudi Arabia will keep 1 million barrels per day in voluntary cuts at least through April. Energy Minister bin Salman said they would eventually and gradually be withdrawn over the next few months, depending what the market requires, without specifying when or under what conditions.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Simon Lewis and Humaira Pamuk of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Myanmar's military rulers attempted to move about $1 billion held at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York days after seizing power on February 1st, prompting U.S. officials to put a freeze on the funds, according to 3 people familiar with the matter, including one U.S. government official. The transaction on February 4th in the name of the Central Bank of Myanmar was first blocked by Fed safeguards. U.S. government officials then stalled on approving the transfer until after an executive order issued by President Joe Biden gave them legal authority to block it indefinitely. A spokesman for the New York Fed declined to comment on specific account holders, and the U.S. Treasury Department also declined to comment. The attempt, which has not been previously reported, came after Myanmar's military installed a new central bank governor and detained reformist officials during the coup. It marked an apparent effort by Myanmar's generals to limit exposure to international sanctions after they arrested elected officials, including de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who had won a national election in November. The army seized power, alleging fraud, claims that the Electoral Commission has dismissed. A spokesman for Myanmar's military government did not answer repeated calls seeking comment, and Reuters was unable to reach officials at the central bank, probably because Myanmar has been putting Reuters photographers and reporters in chokeholds and marching them off to jail. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Ash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.